Okay, it's been a long time, I feel like, since I've done this because I was away and then I had the flu, but I'm back. Hey friends, it's Sam from DIY Hunters, and I'm really excited to show you today how I maximized a small, unorganized storage space in my parents' basement and turned it into a home exercise room. My other half is an amazing cyclist and he needed a space for winter training, and so I made this his space. Now, if you're not into exercising, I do hope you'll still stick around because I am sharing some tips for how to maximize small spaces and add some creative storage. So whether you're looking to turn your large closet into a pseudo home office or just get it organized or maybe have a fun yoga room and get zen, I hope that this project gives you some inspiration, so let's get started.
This project is sponsored by my friends at DAP Products. Now, even though this is my first project on the channel for 2020, I actually started this renovation in the summer of 2019 with my dad when we were renovating his basement. But I recently found a 3-day weekend to finish this space, and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. Now, this space started as a cold storage area, which meant that there was no insulation, no walls, it was just a freezing cold storage room. But when my dad and I renovated the basement, we added some drywall and some insulation, and ever since then, it's kind of just been a storage room for a lot of my other half's cycling equipment because he's a really avid cyclist. That being said, I really wanted to set this room up as his dedicated training space for his winter training and his indoor cycling, and so that's what I did. Now, the first step in getting this room started was to empty it out so that I could work in it, and my little brother is awesome and helped me carry anything heavy or fragile out of the space. I just didn't want to break anything because none of this stuff is mine. But once it was bare bones, I was able to get a good idea of where to start and what to do in the room. While we were able to move most of the stuff out of the room, there were a couple of things that had to stay, and that included a security system that came with the house that is hardwired, and I couldn't move this, so I just decided to carefully cover anything that was fragile or electronic with some plastic before starting. Originally, the first item on my list was to grout the floors, but shortly before beginning this project, I fell ill with the flu for a while, so my amazing little brother decided to grout the floors for me. So on my first day, I was able to come into the room and immediately start sanding all of the drywall that my dad and I installed over the summer. After a ton of sanding and a lot of cleaning, it was time to prep the walls for paint, and I did this by using a drywall primer that is meant for bare drywall and helps to resist some moisture, and since my other half will be working out in this room, it was really important to take this step before painting. Once the entire room was primed, I let it sit for a couple of hours, and then I came back and began to paint the room. And I first started by painting the ceiling with a designated ceiling paint and a roller, and then I worked my way around the room, just painting the room the same color as the rest of the basement. It was really important that I included my other half's input on this room because he will be using it more than anybody else, and one of the things he really wanted was some storage for his jerseys or his cycling equipment, so I decided to buy some pre-made floating cabinets to hang on the wall, and that way it keeps anything off the floor in case anything like sweat or water bottles get on the floor and need to be cleaned up. I did also have to keep in mind the fact that at some point I do hope that we will be homeowners, which means that we will have our own space to renovate and put his bicycle, so the floating cabinets can also act as a floating desk or storage for my dad to use when he eventually converts this space into a small home office. But anyway, back to the build. So once I was done putting together those cabinets, it was then time to hang them on the wall using a French cleat system, and this was made so easy with my new laser level that I got as part of the prospective program this year. But you can find out more information about this tool as well as all of the tools and materials I use for this project on my website by clicking on the link below this video. One thing that I really liked about this floating shelving system was that it came with a couple of different options. You could add adjustable shelving, you could add doors to it. It's just honestly a really great system for organizing small spaces, and I'd honestly recommend it for a pantry or a storage room or even a bathroom, and definitely for an exercise room, obviously. But I also love that they were really easy to install, and altogether it took me about an hour to get these out of the box and onto the wall. Once those cabinets were hung, it was time to turn around and work on the other side of the room, which was kind of annoying because there were so many wires to work around, but I made it work. In any event, one of the things that was requested in this space were some shelving units in order to have a spot for my other half's computer to go when he is training and needs to look at his program. So for a while, he was using a side table that I made to house his computer, and I decided to use that side table as my base point to figure out how high the shelves would hang. And if you haven't noticed the theme yet here, I did go ahead and use that laser level again because it was a lifesaver, and once everything was level, I attached some pre-made brackets to the walls to begin the installation process. One thing that I noticed was pretty unfortunate about this space is that all of the outlets are in the ceiling or are really up high, so in order to make some room for outlets on the floor for his trainer and his computer, I used my jigsaw to cut some notches in pre-painted shelves so that I could thread an extension cord through the back of them. And then after cutting those shelves down to size in my workshop, I brought them back into the space and had my little brother come back to help me install them because it definitely required more than just my hands in order to make sure they were perfectly level. And honestly, it was so helpful having him there because not only was it a tight space to work in, but I had to work around all of these sensitive wires and alarm system equipment, and so he ended up having to hold the alarm system equipment while I unscrewed and rescrewed things, and then had to hold onto brackets while they were suspended in midair. So I was just ultimately so grateful for his help. Okay, now if there's one thing that I hate, it's exposed wires. I don't know why, but extension cords and other things along those lines make me really irrationally mad. So I decided to purchase a couple of cord covers, which were able to attach directly to the wall and hide the cord that was running all the way from the ceiling to the floor. I've used these cord covers so many times in the past, and they're really easy to install. They can be cut using a razor or a blade, and they are attached to the wall using some double-sided tape. And they really worked well in the space, especially because they fit perfectly into those notches I made in the shelf using my jigsaw. Now for the bigger wire messes, like that security system that is in the room, I did invest in some larger cord covers with some organizers. The organizers fit on some wires, they didn't fit on others, but either way, the larger covers made a really big impact as well. Working in a small space means that I banged up and dinged up the walls more times than I wanted to admit. Ugh. So to fix all of those mistakes, I turned to my DAP Drydeck spackling, which I really love, and I used this to fill all of the little holes with the compound, which was pink, and then once that compound dried, it turned white, and I knew that it was time to sand it flush to the wall. And then after sanding all of the spackling, I used a roller and some paint to just touch up all of those spots with the same color as the wall. At this point, I really wanted to start doing some trim work, but I had to get a couple of items off of the floor before I could start bringing the longer pieces of trim into the room, and that included a couple of shadow boxes that I put together with some of his winning jerseys, as well as some storage for his medals. I was originally going to hang these on the wall using some coat racks, but he actually saw this idea. He really liked using a curtain rod, so I installed a curtain rod instead, and I hung his medals to display on the back, and now he can add his medals as he wins more in the future. And once I had more floor space, it was then time to cut the trim for the door and for the floors, and I did this by using a small miter saw that I keep in the basement for trim work, and then applied the trim to the wall using a brad nailer. Because I was working in such a small space, one thing that really helped was picking up the molding in bundle packs at my local Home Depot, and doing this allowed me to get some smaller pieces to fit into the room and then to attach to the floor and to the doors. I also wanted to frame out the security system since it is kind of an eyesore, but it has to stay and it is what it is. And once all of the molding was installed, it was time to use DAP's molding trim sealant to seal up any of the gaps between the molding and the wall. And the little trick that I like to use here is that after applying the caulking to the molding with the caulking gun, I use my finger to smooth out the bead and then keep a damp paper towel around to then lightly rub over that bead as well to just smooth it out even more. But after letting everything dry, I then went back into the room with some touch-up paint and also painted all of the trim with a gloss white paint as well. And for my last trick, it was then time to prepare the space for winter training. In all honesty, I wasn't going to share this space or this room makeover with you guys at first because I wasn't sure if it was something that would feel relatable, but the reality is that the basement is going to be a work in progress for a little while, and I did promise you guys updates as I went along. And honestly, my ultimate hope in sharing this project is that it gives you guys some ideas as to what can be done with a small unusable storage space such as the one that we had in our basement. Like I mentioned earlier, at some point we do hope to be homeowners, and when that time comes, this space will be used for something else that works for my parents, whether it's a home office or a yoga room or just a general pantry area. Whatever it is that they need, they will already have it in this space because it is organized. But for now, if I'm being honest, I'm just super excited that I'm able to give my other half a space for his winter training on his bicycle as he prepares for a new season of cycling in the spring. And he was actually super stoked about the space, and that made me feel awesome. awesome. So I really hope you guys love this space and this project as much as he did, really. And if so, I do hope that you will subscribe for more projects in the future. But in the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all for another project very soon. In the meantime, friends, happy DIYing.